Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. So, this is our podcast with the Elevated Medicine podcast as part of the Priority Health Academy Teaching Center. And we've got a couple of guests today that will be talking about a very interesting nutraceutical. And this will be for the April podcast 2026. And I'm going to introduce Stephanie, who's our organizer, and then she's going to introduce our two speakers, our two guests today, and then they'll take it away. Stephanie?
Hi, everybody. My name's Stephanie. We have with us today Carl Clift, who is the managing director at Medicinals, and Shante Sinatra. Am I saying your last name right? Okay.
Yes.
And she is a brilliant biochemist, chief scientific officer at Medicinals, and they have some important information to share with us. First of all, I don't know how long. I haven't heard of medicinals until recently, but how long have you guys been operating?
Since January 2020, that's when we were operating, and that's the year that we came out and did our study with the WHO in India, and from there it has just taken off fabulously.
All right. Well, and I'm so glad that you have been. I actually spoke with the vice president of a Democratic Party local, and we were talking about COVID and the pandemic, and he was saying, COVID is over. COVID is over. That, like basically any points you make along those lines are moot because COVID is over. For those listeners that we have today that see it that way, would you explain to us why you're focused on what's happening in the body still, even years after the pandemic began?
For sure. So, as you say, a lot of people think that COVID is over. In reality, we're now starting to really view the very damaging effects that took place in the last 6 years. So it is by no means over. And now you have to start focusing upon trying to correct the damages that were done during that active viral phase. And the spike proteins are now our focus because that was permanently placed into our bodies, either through infection or other modalities, but it is by far over.
Yeah. And I think to add on top of that, it's not on TV. It's not in the mainstream. It's not the way it was overhyped in 2020. But if you go back and look at the data that's still being collected in the wastewater systems, for example, across the United States, and CDC has a very large bank of data that's ongoing live. You can find it in Canada. You can find it in New Zealand. There's many, many countries now that continue to do this, and the wastewater levels for spike fragments are still very high. So we know that it's circulating. So the fact that it's not on TV or not top of mind doesn't mean it's not circulating. The second part is that we're seeing it ourselves because we're a technology and a research company and not just a product company. We tested our products for the last 3.5 years to make sure that our claims about trying to reduce a certain antigen in circulation in the body, we have to measure that. And we've been doing that. And our testing in the last 3 years or so has been showing efficacy for our products, but it's been much more important is actually showing at a population level what's occurring. We're still seeing this, and actually in the last 3 to 4 months, we're seeing more of it.
Hmm.
So there's two different ways to think about this. It's the general public and what they're perceiving, but it's also the doctors, scientists, and labs like ourselves and our partners who under the scenes or under the covers are actually still seeing this data. And then the public itself will be feeling it. There's so many different sicknesses out there or disease expressions that are coming back, and we're going to go through those today. They're there. Why are they there? And we're going to point back to our data and the public data to show that there's an underlying cause.
Okay. And now with the wastewater testing that you're doing, is this because the spike protein in people's body is getting flushed like through the toilet, through um, into wastewater, and then you're measuring what's being put out there?
So,
Yes, so it is
yeah.
carried through the urine, but the wastewater has been monitored since January 2020 when this began. And it continues to be a source that they check to kind of predict spread or where the next infection or next town will be hit hard. But they've been doing that all along. And yes, it is found in the urine.
And the
Right.
wastewater we're talking about measuring is not through medicinals or our lab partners,
Hmm.
it's through the countries themselves. So we're measuring the spike proteins itself, the fragments themselves, which are also remnants from the way, which can also be correlated in the wastewater levels as well. But the wastewater levels are coming from our own, funded resources across multiple countries. So we're not making this up.
Mm.
You can still see them. Two-minute research and you'll find them.
So even if people and patients aren't being tested, um, because they're putting bodily fluids into the wastewater, it's almost like a way of checking the city body at large. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So when people hear long COVID right now, they're usually thinking of a set of basic symptoms like persistent cough or extreme fatigue, brain fog. Are you saying is driving those symptoms beyond what people are generally thinking?
Well, I think for the most part, they're not connecting all the dots between what used to be a viral infection and what is now spike protein persistence. So long after the virus is gone, the spike proteins are lingering in the body and they cause inflammation. They cause all types of gut dysregulations. Like you just mentioned, the most common symptoms are what people relate to long COVID. But this um, just feeling that something's wrong, or that just because the tests say that I'm supposed to feel normal, I don't feel normal. People complain about exercise malaise where they can't get upstairs and they can't haul groceries and their walks that they used to do are shorter. So not only are they seeing this, as a medical symptoms list, they're seeing it as reduced quality of life. That is what we hear a lot, is the things that people used to be able to do they're no longer able to do. And that is a lingering spike protein persistence long
Okay.
after the virus leaves the body. Yes.
So spike can come in when just if they got a COVID infection, even if they never got the COVID vaccine, or it can come through the vaccine as it regenerates that spike
Yeah,
protein.
so there's several different ways that you can perpetuate this spike protein. So once the initial infection from the whole virus is made, these spike proteins become nested in host reservoir cells. Like the gut epithelial cells become infected, they can become a productive spike protein source. Your host cells themselves, then we have that viral induced senescence that we're all pretty knowledgeable about. There are, different ways that this can perpetuate production and it be long after the infection.
Right. So what is that spike protein exactly, and why does it matter that it's sticking around long after exposure or
Yes,
infection?
so on the surface of the virus, the spike protein is that standard corona that looks like a crown, and on the outside of the virus are these spike proteins. Those spike proteins are used, number one, to fuse with the host cell, and then secondarily to get in through the receptors and different entrance pathways that they've exploited in the regular cell biology. And so the spike proteins are responsible for getting it into the cell and it being infectious.
Okay. Now, I know a lot of people who did not get the vaccine were under the impression that the spike that came through the infection would disappear as they recover or as natural immunity took over.
Mhm.
What made you start questioning that assumption?
Yeah, so we had the same question ourselves when there was so much focus put on vaccine injury, which by no means can be dismissed. It's obvious there were a lot of people damaged, but at the same time, the damages that are from the wild virus itself, just getting the infection alone, despite vaccination or non-vaccination, we were seeing that these cohorts were remaining just as sick. And then when we saw in the data, we were expecting our largest groups of very sick people to carry this double proline vaccine in signature. So we can test the spike protein to see if it's from the vaccination or if it's from a natural infection. And what we saw was that for the majority of the part, these were not people that had been vaccinated. They did not carry that signature. And over time, their spike proteins were continuing to be produced and they were continuing to be sick. So we concluded that people have really overlooked how dangerous this natural infection can become. It is not just, oh, I'm fine because I didn't get a vaccination. That is not the way to think about this. It's very untrue.
And I
Okay.
think one of the things as well is understanding how it's not a single event that occurs where you get exposed and then it's over. It's not like you broke your arm and you get your arm fixed and you're fine. The spike protein in and of itself can be moved around the body in a number of ways and moved from body to body. So this idea of shedding is absolutely real, and Shantae will go into some much deeper science about that. But understanding that the the fact that the virus it continues to propagate today, which we everybody says, oh, COVID's over. Well, no, it's not over. We see it in the wastewater, and we still see people getting sick. It's just a different version, but it's continuing to go out. And as that happens, it continues to spread body to body as well. So once you start to understand that this is one of these little clouds that continues to grow. It's not as thick as it was before, but it's still there. We're now going to then show you that once you are exposed. One of our partner doctors about 2 months ago said we are all one infection away from long COVID. That scared the living bejeebies out of most people on the call because we were all thinking, okay, we're okay. We're taking care of our health. We're doing certain things. And then you realize, no, that this thing is very prevalent and you need to understand that when you are exposed via these multiple methods, there are things you need to think about immediately before you allow this to go through these stages that Shantae will actually describe shortly.
All right. So in that data, it definitely showing that spike is showing up more
Yes.
often over time, not less.
Right. Yeah. So that's what really, led us to look into this further is that there has to be some self-replication, self-amplification of these spike proteins long after the virus is gone. And that was what we were seeing in the data. We weren't seeing an immune neutralization take place. It was rather that this was getting to be a larger and larger problem when you focused on the spike proteins and its presence rather than just the whole virus, which our tests have been set up to do so far. And that is what we say in the data that this number continues to go up, and across populations, it is extremely hard to find anyone that reads non-detectable or that they don't have a spike persistence burden. It's almost impossible to find someone that's negative.
Hmm.
Regardless of symptoms. And that is the
Mhm.
concern we have. There's multiple different testing methodologies now, but one of our testing methodologies in Europe that we're using in the last 4 months is showing asymptomatic positivity greater than 70%. That means folks are walking around feeling absolutely fine, but when they do a quick blood test for circulating spike in the blood, 70% of them are showing positive
Mhm.
without a clue that it's happening. When you then think about, and we'll see the stages that somebody goes through, you'll see stage one and even stage two can be completely asymptomatic as this is causing a certain amount of damage inside the body, but not symptomatically being felt. But it's there and it's going to get worse. There's a path that it goes down. And this is what we're trying to alert people to is to be aware of that prior to these symptoms coming on as such.
Okay. So that when the symptoms do come on, they have an idea of what is happening.
Correct, but ideally you want to get that before, if at least from an education point of view, to understand that this is a concern, and particularly I think with respect to mischaracterization. So, for example, you suddenly get something that you do not believe has got anything to do with COVID or a virus or a spike protein. However, we're going to show from a foundational point of view, it does actually have something to do with that because that antigen itself has affected the immune support at a foundational level and at a population level. And therefore, everything that you're getting is actually going to be a direct result of this spike affecting your foundational immune system.
Okay. Now, I mean, for the people that I know of that are suspicious, maybe they haven't had testing done for spike protein, but they're suspicious that they've been shed on. They generally reach for the nattokinase, ivermectin, fasting, sunlight,
Mhm.
bromelain, curcumin. What are would you consider that adequate, or is it just a dampening or a delaying or is it doing any good at all?
I think everything has been valuable going through this experience. I think everyone responds a little bit differently. We like to ask that question when we're doing our data and tests in our research groups, and we ask them, "Hey, what have you tried so far?" 6 years later, just about everyone has tried everything in one form or fashion to get rid of spike proteins and or the virus. And what we see in our data is that for the most part, they might quell inflammatory markers like IL-6 or IL-8 or IL-10 or TNF alpha. Inflammatory markers sometimes come down in different modalities. But to say that you've actually cleared the spike protein, we have not seen anything hold true to being able to remove spike proteins outside of the program that we have created. And that shows in the data that we can go from a very large number, and then over 12 weeks, we get to a non-detectable. So we've done this for 3 years. We've done repeated testing to make sure that our program is efficient at removing spike proteins, because that is the one thing we do not want to go unhindered. It needs to be stopped and removed and excreted from the body before it can go on to do damaging things. So I think everything has a place, and I believe that all advantages are great. At the end of the day, spike protein removal has been accomplished by a program that we've done with testing and products together.
Okay. Okay, that's great and very hopeful, and I'm sure we'll get to that in a bit. If I was going to ask you, if the virus itself isn't detectable anymore, how can the spike protein still be present months or even years later?
Yeah, so as mentioned, you have number one, you have these host reservoir cells. So the single most important thing is removing these senescent cells that have been infected. That is a mechanism of most all viruses. Viral induced senescence is not a new COVID terminology. It just became more, aware and actively used in conversations. But viral induced senescence is what most viruses use to get into a cell. The number one thing they need to do is stop autophagy. They do not need to get into a cell and then that cell go through normal cell cycling and go through autophagy, and it dies along with the cell cycle. So the virus's main job is to stop autophagy so that it can now hijack the cell machinery, replicate itself, and or whole virus or spike proteins in this case. And that is the main replication process of most all viruses. So we want to be able to make sure that that autophagy being overridden by the virus is interrupted. So number one, clear your senescent cells. That's really, really important to get rid of these. And these host reservoirs, you have to look at your PBMCs being infected. So CD14 and CD16 show large signatures of viral and spike protein presence in their cells. So that's worrisome that you have monocytes that are now being produced with spike proteins and viral fragments already in them. If you're sending your immune cells out to do their job to protect you and or to break down the pathogen and they're already infected, then that makes good sense that you would not have a good, strong, robust immune response to remove these from the body. So along with the host reservoirs, the exosomes being infected, the monocytes being infected, you've got a large array of places where the spike protein and or the virus can continue production.
And we've just put a quick slide up here as well. So I really like this one, Shante, that we are showing exactly what happens from healthy cells down to non-healthy cells, and the idea being that it's not just that moment that you get this virus and then those few days afterwards that you're fighting. This is a longer term process that occurs inside the body, and it's important to understand where somebody is in terms of their progression to be able to understand exactly where to treat them, either symptomatically or even from a root cause point of view.
Okay. So, you talk about the spike spreading between cells in a way that bypasses the immune system. Can you explain why that's important?
Sure. So this is called tunneling nanotubes that you're looking at here on this slide. What you can see, and you can see this under a scope, is there's these little nanotubes that are made, created cell to cell. And what that allows for is the virus can spread from cell to cell, and the immune system can no longer neutralize that or grab it through antibody defenses or phagocytosis to take place and remove the virus and or spike proteins. So here you see they can go from a nice productive cell into and go and infect a healthy cell. And what happens is this can spread throughout the body. And a lot of times this happens in senescent cells that we discussed because they're easy hanging fruit for a virus to grab a hold of a senescent cell. Their metabolic activity is a little bit lower, their cell replication is a little bit lower, so it's an easier cell for them to hijack and attack and consider a really good replication source. If we want to go down to that next slide, Carl, where it shows the syncytia formation, you get an idea of once this senescent cell um, cascade has started, you can see here that you got amplification through cell fusion. And what happens is you've got these cells that fuse into clusters. Once the syncytia formation takes place, it just becomes a literally open replication source for both the virus and the spike proteins. And you can see these syncytia formations do not allow for regular cell functions. They can no longer cell divide. They can no longer go through metabolic changes. So they've been hijacked. Their autophagy cycles have been stopped, and they can replicate there without any type of immune pressures, unfortunately.
So this it may all be going on subclinically, like where people are not seeing symptoms yet, as you talked about earlier. Uh,
Mhm.
so if people aren't seeing symptoms, it's a cleanup problem for them. Um, when does it become a long-term damage problem?
Yeah, so we can go back to the previous slide with the senescent cells on it. So, um, why would you want to catch this early, and what happens when it's kind of reached a tipping point, right? So, in the beginning, at the top where you see all the blue, there's only two cells there that have spike protein. Now, imagine all these cells are going to go through their normal cell cycling division, make the daughter cells. We do this trillions of times a day. Imagine now that your next cell cycle is going to replicate those spike proteins and the virus that was already there. And then you start seeing that the bystander cells are infected. So maybe they don't have spike and or virus in them directly, but they're now metabolically challenged. They're not going through cell cycle division appropriately. Now the virus and the toxins can get into there far easier. And you get this rippling effect, kind of like throwing a rock in the water, and you start seeing all the rings propagate. This is the same way that this tipping point is reached. So at the very bottom, where you're seeing basically you get to a point where your spike proteins are being replicated, your virus as a whole is being replicated, you have senescent cells that are now completely infected, and now your healthy cells are lower than your infected cells, meaning you don't have a real opportunity to recover, and nor do you have the healthy cells there to keep the virus and or spike proteins in check from replicating out of control. So that tipping point becomes where you don't have enough healthy cells that are available to re-enter the cell cycle that aren't infected to manage recovery.
And as part of this for the layman, what we're working on with our partners is something called a cellular stress ratio. So everybody would say, okay, well, where am I on this chart? And based upon where I'm going, where's that tipping point? At what point in time does the stress that's occurring at the cellular level here, the ratio become the tipping point? And how do I stop myself from getting to that cliff? And this is what we're trying to figure out now with respect to with our labs and our doctors, because we're seeing the mechanism of action of how the spike protein is using these cells and propagating. We're now trying to figure out exactly on a person to person basis, where do we help them? And we can only do that if we can define exactly where they are in terms of that stage.
Mhm.
And what systems would they be looking for damage in first?
Uh, Unfortunately, right now it's extremely hard. Even the blood work where they're checking different inflammatory markers, that seems to be the most commonly used. But fortunately, we don't have a very good adequate test for this. And the best thing that you can do is look at the spike protein quantitatively, say with a mass spec test, or look at it through an exosomes test where you can check the exosomes and or PBMCs to see how much of it's being passed around cell to cell. But to say that there would be one test or a panel of tests to tell you how good or bad of a condition you're in doesn't exist at this time.
Okay. Now, I know Dr. Jordan Vaughn early on, he was instrumental in explaining the difference between a oxygenation problem because of the mechanics of ventilation versus
Hmm.
the microclotting. Like a lot of patients that were in the hospital on ventilators because their oxygen saturation numbers were so low, it wasn't helping because the even though the oxygen was going in, the tiny blood clots in the alveoli where that
Hmm.
exchange is supposed to take place, those there were microclots there that the clotting tests weren't picking up on in the hospital. Um,
Right.
so how is spike protein contributing to these tiny clots?
Yeah, so it's creating the perfect storm. Unfortunately, the charge differences between the cationic and the anionic positive and negative charges here are enough to draw them together. So if you have these microclots that are there, and then of course you have the nets that have formed, and then you get this cascade of just the attraction to one another, and you get these nanocrystalline complexes. And these microclots deny oxygen to tissues. The capillary beds now are hypoxic, and you get into this ever evolving state of hypoxia. And at that stage is what you just explained. You can't get any oxygen exchange, and that cell becomes metabolically damaged beyond repair. And the microclots we're seeing as we've worked with Dr. Jordan Vaughn, there aren't standard tests that show you that. D-dimers are not good indicators of whether you have microclots or not. It's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not something that can say, oh, you've got this blood result, hence you must have a lot of microclots. Dr. Jordan Vaughn's microclot test is the only way to confirm that. And
And
the spike
unfortunately,
proteins continue to feed that replenishing. So, as long as you have a low grade spike persistence protein available, these microclots have a replenishing source all of the time.
and I think I would say to those watching, you need to take this information to your doctors and let them know that you've done some research. This is what you're seeing. This is what some of the companies in this field as such are finding out, and let them know because most of the time, if you go to a standard mainstream doctor who's not really involved in this for the last 6 years, they won't even know what a microclot is, and then you're in trouble because they have no clue what to do with you. So it's really, really important that people will take this information and add to it and use it as part of their arsenal when they go and advocate for themselves.
So those microclots, they explain the fatigue, the brain fog, and the exercise intolerance associated
Mhm.
with long COVID as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So if someone has been diagnosed by their primary doctor with long COVID, they need to be evaluated or treated for microclots.
Yes, that is first and foremost.
But
Okay.
I do think, Stephanie, that the term long COVID is a bit of a red herring because according to the CDC, there's 80 to 100 different symptoms that they are classifying as long COVID. I think you need to get much more granular than that. At the foundational level, we're talking about inflammation, and inflammation will cause everything above it to turn bad. So the key is going to be looking at the different parts of the body that the spike protein is affecting via these mechanisms that Shante has just discussed, and then be able to focus very specifically on where it's affecting you. Some people will have the syncytia build up in the brain. Some will have it build up in other areas in the body, and that will manifest in different symptoms and sometimes different treatment protocols. We have a treatment protocol for removing spike, but on top of us, many of our doctors and networks will use many other things because they're treating other specific um, effects that the spike protein persistence has had. So you may very well combine, as you said, ivermectin and many other things, depending on exactly where that spike persistence is occurring.
Okay. Yes, I mean, I hear what you're saying, like especially with the way that spike dysregulates the immune system. A lot of times, the first symptoms we're seeing are from a reemergence of viruses that the immune system has previously dealt with. So we're
Mhm.
seeing like neuropathy and that sort of thing as a first warning signal. You said you found spike inside immune cells. Well, what is that causing, or what is the result of that?
Yes, it's very worrisome. Your immune cells or your PBMCs, they're what you would kind of call your first fighters to the field. You know, if you're going to go after a pathogen, virus, bacterial, yeast, or whatever it is, these monocytes are triggered to go out and do the job and mature into macrophages, which then degrade whatever the pathogen it is. If we have been able to find spike proteins inside of the monocytes, which we have for the last 3 years, that leads you to question, well, what's actually left to do the job? If you have monocytes that are coming out with spike proteins in them, and their job is to go and engulf other viruses and spike protein debris, obviously they're not able to do their job. And that's where you get into the cytokine storms and the hyperexpression of the immune system and that cascade that we often hear as mast cell activation. We see that kind of coupled with it in this hyperimmune response. And that would make sense, right? If you've got a bunch of monocytes that are full of spike proteins and that cell didn't do the job, then the body sends out more and more and more and more. So there's a huge response, but very little work gets done. And that is the issue in being able to combat or get rid of the spike persistence is the very cell lines meant to combat that are infected.
Oh, yeah. So they're sending out signals to the rest of their army, hey, we haven't beat this yet. Come in larger numbers. And
Right. Yeah. It sets off many cascades for hyper expression in immune cells. Yes. They
um,
will continue to try to fight that. And then, of course, once you get into T cell exhaustion, that just becomes another complex issue. And then from there, you can get into autoimmune disorders. So each consecutive infection needs to be considered as a layered challenge.
you mentioned these senescent cells. Can you explain for everyone what is cellular senescence?
Sure. So our cell cycles are set up to go through different phases, and senescence is one of them. So senescence is a normal, natural state of the cell cycle, and when the cell has gotten to the end of its lifetime, then it will enter into a senescent state. There's a difference between being a senescent cell and being what we call SASP. So once you get into where you're actually secreting cytokines like IL-6 and IL-8, TNF alpha, then that is what we would call a damaging senescent cell. So there is a difference. And what happens with these senescent cells is once they're induced or infected by a virus, they will go from a healthy senescent state into the SASP. And that's the point where you get the really high anti-inflammatory systems that break down. They're overwhelmed with IL-6 and IL-8, TNF alpha, and that inflammation just goes unregulated. It's not controlled. So the senescent cells are where that takes place. These senescent cells, sometimes people call them zombie states, where they're not real metabolically active. They're not going through the normal cell cycle, but they are a really good target for viruses.
Okay. So all this stuff is going on in patients. If they are going to their primary doctor and the doctor is, I don't know, testing for different things and can't find anything, and
Mm.
they're being dismissed, why is that happening?
Simply because every test that we have available in this country has an indirect viewpoint to the spike protein or the virus, right? There's not a real direct test. Um, Look at the antibody, for instance. Yes, it's been somewhat helpful in classing who's who in severity, but that's not always true. And it's a response to. So your antibody test is how did your body deal with it? How did you respond to that infection? That could be from 2021 or 2023. It could be from last month. So the antibody titers are not been very helpful. And we find that with all tests because they're all indirect measurements. Whereas if you go to switch over to a mass spec, for instance, and you get a quantitative spike protein count, or was it affiliated with the vaccination, or does it have a bacterial feature attached to it? Is it from your gut? When you can start looking at, is it in your exosomes? Is it in your PBMCs? That is a more direct way of looking at this is what's going on. This is how you feel. Let's take all of these modalities and really see what your doctor can do to help get you into recovery.
And I'll say to Stephanie, I just wanted to bring that one up as well, Shante, with respect to the bacteria. We hadn't really mentioned that, but the whole one of the key points to get across here is that the spike comes in from multiple sources, and then once inside the body, it does all kinds of wonderful things. We found with our partnership with Dr. Carlo Brogna in Italy, the bacteriophage. So if maybe you could give somebody people an understanding of that.
Sure. So in our mass spec testing, we do what's called an origin test. And what we're wanting to see is if that spike protein has come into contact with a bacterial cell. And in that form, it will give a D amino acid that is indicative that it's been through a bacterial cell. And that lets us know that that spike protein has been involved in a gut infection. Not that it's been circulating or that's an immune cell. This shows us specifically gut infection. That's a bacteriophage. So a bacteriophage is when a virus has invaded a bacterial cell inside of you. So it is a little bit of everything. It's part bacteria, part virus, part us. And that makes it extremely complicated. They put out these really nasty toxin-like peptides that you do not want circulating in your gut or throughout your system. That's the bacteriophage activity is a virus that infects a bacterial cell inside of you.
Interesting. So then does that bacteria cell start behaving differently?
Absolutely. It starts putting out a lot of toxin-like peptides.
Oh,
And Dr. Carlo Brogna's work, you can look in some of his publications from 2022 onward, and it shows a heavy connection to different venoms and toxic peptides that we see from other animals. So it's all related. And once this gets into a bacterial setting, a lot of these toxin-like peptides are shared. It's quite worrisome to see just how similar they are. But Carlo Brogni has done a fantastic job. If you all are interested in looking into that deeper, he has all the information you could possibly need.
wow. It just feels like we're at the very beginning of understanding a new level of pathology because of this.
Yes.
All right. So when you look at the blood samples now, what patterns are you seeing?
Um, the number one pattern is that it keeps going up. We're not seeing people overcome this virus. They are not getting on the other side of better or hey, I've overcome that infection and I'm fine now. We're just seeing higher and higher and higher infected people numbers. And so that's worrisome because it's showing us that we are not doing a good job at combating this. Either the virus or the spike protein or any of its derivatives, some cell fragments, our body is not capable of breaking this down, neutralizing the pathogen, and excreting it from our body. It has to have help. That's the biggest thing that we've seen is the numbers continue to go up. People are not getting well, and this spike protein production is now replicating on its own. It does not need a full viral infection to make that happen, and that's very worrisome.
Wow. Well, how can measuring the spike at a population level change how we forecast disease?
I think for one thing, awareness. I think everyone thinking, oh, COVID's here and it's done and it's over with and I'm not sick with it anymore. That can get us into a troublesome state where if we turn our cheek and ignore it, this problem is just going to get larger and larger and larger. Um, so yeah, I think awareness is the main thing is that people need to understand this is not over. And the real damaging 5 to 7 years post the infection is where we start seeing autoimmunes and cancers and these unexplained illnesses now are really going to reach their tipping point, which is what I'm afraid to see this year, next year, is that we're reaching the point where people have just gotten to the state of exhaustion. Nothing has worked. The doctors are frustrated. The patients are frustrated. The scientists are now kind of, hey, we've went through all this that we can. So I think just awareness and resiliency. We all need to stay resilient and believing this needs more work. We're far from over.
And I'll add to that. I think I'm a sort of researcher data guy, and the issue that I see is that the data that is being used in the models to forecast things like long COVID persistence or long COVID numbers as such, the variables that they're using are very indicative of the final outcome. So, for example, if you're looking at a population level or population scale analysis, if your number, for example, of spike persistence in asymptomatic. If your number is, let's say you're estimating 15%, if your N is only 100 as such, then your numbers aren't going to change very much. But if your population scale testing is, if you're looking at 100 million or 200 million, and that 15% asymptomatic number is now 17%, it's a huge difference. And our testing is showing that if you're assuming that, this spike protein is really not persisting very much, or the virus is really not around very much, and therefore COVID is at 2 to 3% or 7 to 8% of the population, and our data showing it's 60%. Well, that means you're 33 million for COVID, according to the CDC, is well over 100. And
Mhm.
that is our concern. And I'm not saying that's the case. What I am saying is we need, from a population level, just to get an understanding of this so we can forecast that really the size of the problem and then the speed of the problem. But
Mhm.
without that data, it's very, very difficult. We're doing it case by case by case with some fantastic doctors and labs, etc. But we need to do this at a population scale because if you don't understand these numbers, we won't be able to stop the tsunami.
Mhm.
Well, a lot of physicians and practitioners in our academy, they're asking about better testing. And I know, Shante, you said we don't really have anything
Right.
available. I know the mass spectrometry, the exosome testing, that
Yes.
that's not available. Like a physician couldn't order that right now.
Yes, the physicians can order them, and Carl can both either post here or give the information to the lab partners. The Javelin Sciences Lab has now opened in Michigan, and they are doing the exosomes test. That is physician order only. The mass spec test that is open to the public per their website, and Carl can give you the information so you all can order those for yourselves or your patients or however you want to do. That is an affiliate program. It's a research use only test. It's not diagnostic. This is ongoing in our data sets that you hear us talk about. So this is our ongoing research to try to really get a clear image of this picture and how it is. We've had to basically use our own testing because it simply doesn't exist in the market.
Okay. And,
Yes.
and what I mean, specifically just to state for this podcast, we don't have any conflicts of interest with medicinals, and we're not they're not paying us to talk about their product. But I do feel like it's important for people to know about what you have created in response to the data and the science that you're seeing. Can you tell us a little bit about what you put together?
Absolutely. So medicinals started in 2020, January. And during that time, we absolutely knew we were dealing with a virus. So what do you want to do in any terms of virus before we actually knew what it was? We knew that there was four phases. Number one, you have to um, get that autophagy cycle back in. As I mentioned earlier, viruses want to get in and they want to shut autophagy off so they can replicate in place. So the overriding that autophagy blockage is extremely important. Then number two, you ideally want to selectively break up the senescent cells that are harboring spike in the virus. And then three, you want to be able to neutralize those liberated particles, the spike, the virus, and fragments with binders because you don't want to just move it from one cell to the next. That's just making the problem worse. And then finally, you want to block those host cell receptors and fusion enzymes that would just pass it to the next one, i.e., transfection would occur. So when we were looking at the products,
Yeah,
we
I'll just bring
went
those up
through
in a second.
large databases, and that is how this program is designed. So those four that I just explained are in our bundle. So in the bundle, you have the mother liquid, that is Medicinals 9 that you all are familiar with. It does 90% of the work. And then we knew that we had to do something with the senescent cell burden. That's where the product Senalescence came in. That is our once a week senescent clearer. It's senolytic therapies that a lot of you are familiar with. Then the sequestrals are our binders. Those are taken every day. And their purpose is to make sure that transfection is not occurring, i.e., cell to cell transfer. We're blocking that with the binders. And then the omega purtide, that is put in to make sure that you have the membrane integrity and your cell support for making massive amounts of new cells. You need those fatty acids available to do that, and along with all the other great benefits of omegas. The Neuralescence Night Spray, That was made to help combat the lymphatic system in the brain. We know that those are being attacked by spike proteins in the astrocytes and the parasites. And this Neuralescence night spray has a very minimal amount of melatonin in it. And it helps to grab a hold of those spike proteins and help you detox at night through the lymphatic system. So that as a whole bundle was what we designed in order to help with those 4 phases of detox. They have done quite a phenomenal job in the past years helping people facilitate their recovery.
And we do have, it is important to understand that there's a progression here in terms of products and protocols that we are researching and then working with doctors and networks to come up with and actually produce. So we have a new spray coming out, which is going to be a day spray. So this is the idea is that will help with respect to spike protein initially coming in, viral infection coming in through the nasopharynx. So it's similar to the Neuralescence Night, but without the melatonin and some other things in there as well. But each of these products have come along based upon what we're trying to do in terms of addressing the mechanism of action and these stages. So as this virus changes, the variants change, and as the spike protein behavior changes, we're trying to monitor that as best as we can, and then bring products and protocols to the market to help. The one thing I would say for all of the doctors who are listening in it really depends on the person, the individual person, as to what phase they are in terms of the spike persistence and in terms of the virus itself moving in and out. So some people will start with a small amount of V9 at half a bottle. It's a bioavailable, which I'll have Shantae talk about. But some will jump straight into the stack. But it really is important to understand where you feel in terms of these 4 stages as to the best way to start a protocol as such. Actually, Shante, just a quick thing on the liquid because in the United States,
Mhm.
people are not used to taking liquids as such. It's usually pills, but we
Sure.
specifically made this as a liquid, and here's why.
Yes. So we went through a very difficult task of getting an emulsion solution made out of these 9 compounds. So the Ayurvedic medicine requires you to mix a lot of water and oils together, and we know that does not take place naturally. So we created and invented a new technology called an emulsion technology, and that is used to make our liquids extremely bioavailable. So where you would think of normally someone trying to get turmeric or curcumin, them taking 5, 6, 7 capsules, then those capsules are very rarely broken down in the gut and very rarely absorbed. We have done a phenomenal job with this emulsion technology stabilizing those compounds, and we made them so bioavailable that we actually had to reduce the dosage. It just became too much all at once. So that's where you got the half a bottle versus a whole bottle, is in us perfecting that bioavailability through the emulsion techniques.
Okay, so that's important for people to know that
Yeah.
one dose is half a bottle. I know that might confuse people at first, thinking, "Oh,
Yes.
it must be too much," but that's appropriate.
Right. Yes,
But
and if you are in an active infection, say like you're sick or you have a viral infection, then a whole bottle a day is what you push up to during active infection. Otherwise, it's half a bottle a day. It becomes too much for too long in a bottle every day.
Okay.
and some people as well will say they will finish the protocol as such 12 or 16 weeks and they've cleared the spike and they'll say, well, now what? And we'll say, well, can you go on a maintenance dose? Well, yes, you could because you're going to be constantly exposed via multiple methods that we talked about. So how much should you take? Well, we'll say you can take a teaspoon, a
Mhm.
tablespoon, something, preventative or maintenance wise as such, but very, very low. Again,
Right.
each time it depends. The more educated you are in terms of your own condition and what's happening in the marketplace in terms of the foundational immune support, the better you're going to be equipped to treat yourself and your friends and family.
Okay.
Stay educated.
A treatment and then becomes prevention.
Maintenance. Let's use the term
Maintenance.
maintenance. Yes.
Maintenance. Yes.
And
Got to
people,
be careful what terms we use.
I know people are going to ask about giving this to children.
We cannot recommend that at all. Unfortunately, every bottle made in this country says no one under the age of 18 and or breastfeeding or pregnant mothers.
Okay. All right. And I'm assuming that that's in your future, looking at how to take care of the children too.
We would love to. That's a lot of risk But if there's a true fighter pediatrician that wants to step up and come bear arms with us, we'd be glad to welcome them.
Well, is there any other thoughts or sentiments that you want to share with people watching?
I just want everyone to realize that this natural infection was a big deal. It was very taxing to the body. We are nowhere near recovery, and it's not fear mongering. This is something that is happening in your body. And please be aware that you're not crazy and there are lots of people suffering, and we all need to keep open minds, work together, and get through this.
I would add that realistically, given what's happened in the last 6 years, there's no one group, there's no one pill, there's no one protocol, there's no one thing. We all have to figure this out together, and therefore, those who are suffering themselves from long COVID vaccine injuries, etc., and or have friends, we need them to step up to help us be able to explore what's working, what's not working, our protocols, many other protocols as well. The one thing that Joaquin will always tell you, and he's the founder and chief scientist from Germany, is that we are only part of it, right? And we're and he will even comment that says we're what you need to take before therapy can start, because it's at the foundational level. But we need others to step up with us, give us some time, give us some testimonials, give us the goods, the bads, the ugly, so that we can put together a better picture and understand what's going on today as well as tomorrow. This BA 3.2 is very, very different than what it was 3 months ago. The new variants are coming on faster than we've ever seen. The T cell exhaustion is faster. Where can we get others to help us, give us some data that they're seeing with their patients so that we can actually use that data from a protocol point of view, from a treatment protocol, from an advisory point of view. It's so important. And what I would say is that, reaching out to us, not to buy product, reaching out to us to say, listen, I'd like to contribute. I can give you some time. I can help you. I can put you in touch with some patients. We're looking at IRBs in the future right now as well. But anything we can do together to educate everybody more and bring more data to the table, it can only help everybody. And this is a big fight.
It
Mhm.
is.
Now, how can they reach you if you have a practitioner who wants to work with you or a patient who introduces their doctor to you?
So
So,
there's a typical website. If you go to the website, you're going to see support at medicinals.com. But we're a little different. We've got emails and we've got phone numbers and we pick them up. So I'm Carl at medicinals.com and
yep,
Shantae is Shantae at medicinals.com, and you email us and you'll get a response quickly. And
yep.
when you call customer support, somebody answers the phone quickly, which is usually hilarious because they never expect anybody to. Yeah, we're small and we got to be nimble and quick. So you'll
Yes.
get hold of us if you want to.
I can vouch for that for sure. And the website for medicinals.
medicinalsusa.com.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you both so much for being with us and for your instruction and warnings and for the hope that you offer as well. But hope
Thank you so much for having us. We
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Stephanie. Much appreciated.
have a good day. Bye,
You too.
everybody.
Bye bye.